Good evening. I'm Elisabeth Lindenmayer. I'm the director of the United Nations program here at SIPA, and I want to welcome you all to our panel on the development challenges at the United Nations in a time of multiple crises and the role of women in development. I just want to tell you that this panel is co-sponsored by the Economic and Political Development Concentration, by the Human Rights Concentration, by the Humanitarian Affairs Program, and the Institute for Latin American Studies. It's really a great honor for me to introduce you tonight as the moderator of the panel, the administrator of UNDP, Helen Clark. She is coming for the first time as SIPA. She is the first woman at the head of UNDP. She really is a role model for many young women in the world, and certainly at SIPA, she's a leader herself. And prior to coming to the United Nations, she was the Prime Minister of New Zealand 3 times in a row, and I believe that she was also the first woman as the Prime Minister of New Zealand. She was there from 1999 to 2008. She also, while she was the Prime Minister, belonged to the Council of Women for World Leaders, which is a network of high-level women who try to mobilize attention on important issues. And the issue of women has always been, I think, on her agenda. She is really, I think, a person who can speak about development challenges like nobody else can for many different reasons. But I would like her to welcome you with a big applause because that is her first time at the school. So let's welcome her. Tomorrow at the United Nations headquarters, there will be a meeting hosted by the Secretary General and the United States in cooperation with the Haitian government. It will be a high-level donor conference, and it will be called Towards a Future for Haiti. And I just would like to use this opportunity perhaps to thank UNDP and through Helen Clark, all her staff, for the incredible support that myself and 6 of my students received while we were in Haiti during the earthquake. It just happened that our last meeting, we had finished a week of meeting, and our last meeting was with UNDP, and we were just in front of the building, getting out of the van, when the earthquake struck. And we spent the whole night on the UNDP compound, and we were evacuated to the logistic base of MINUSTA the following morning, thanks to UNDP, and I really want to express my appreciation because I do believe that if we came back alive, the 7 of us, it's probably because of the support of UNDP. Thank you. You know about the devastating earthquake which struck in Haiti in January and which killed more than 220,000 people, which affected more than 1.5 million people, and 1.3 people are really in temporary shelters just now in tents and are facing the rainy season, which has started, as well as the hurricane season. And the conference tomorrow will be to see how we can help the government of Haiti rebuild its country, but also how can you ensure a smooth transition between the humanitarian assistance phase, in which Haiti is still very much into, to a recovery phase and long-term development, and that will be a huge challenge for everyone. In September, again at the United Nations, there will be a 10-year review summit on the MDGs, on the Millennium Development Goals, which is another challenge and development. And everybody, all the member states, the United Nations, will review the commitment of 10 years ago and talk about the strategies which could be used to reach the goals in 2015, the goals which were set up 10 years ago. But these are just 2 examples of development challenges. I'm sure that Helen Clark will have many more to speak about. The challenges are daunting, as you know, but whether they flow from conflicts or from the global the global economic crisis or from the financial crisis or natural disasters like Haiti and Chile and Turkey, UNDP is involved. And therefore, I cannot think, they have 135 offices, I believe, around the world. They're on the ground all the time. They, you know, from Iraq to Afghanistan, from Haiti to Congo to Liberia, they are all over the place. And I can't think of a better person to talk to you tonight about the challenges of development. So, Helen, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Elisabeth, for the introduction and for your kind words about UNDP and what it does. And can I also acknowledge what a terrifying experience you and your students have had in Haiti. I want to make some comments about Haiti towards the end of the remarks I make today, but I knew you had been in Haiti with a group at the time of the earthquake, and we've just been talking in your office before coming about what actually happened, and I can only imagine how traumatic it must have been. I went to Haiti 4.5 days after the earthquake and saw the site of the Hotel Christopher, which your group had just left, and we all know what that means. So really, you know, hearts are with you, because it takes a long time of effort to get memories like that away. You just can't forget what happened. Elisabeth also reminds me that 10 years ago she came to New Zealand with Kofi Annan's delegation. I was a new Prime Minister, and Kofi Annan came to New Zealand as Secretary General of the United Nations off the back of a visit to Timor-Leste, I think. And he made wonderful comments about New Zealand at that time, which we very much appreciated. You said that you thought I was the first woman to be Prime Minister in New Zealand. Actually, I was the first to win an election. But the way political life goes, when you're on the rise in politics, your opponents will always look for any way to try and knock you off that path. And so 2 years before the general election in New Zealand, when we were on course to win, the Conservative Party, which was in government, had a palace coup, and they deposed the serving male Prime Minister, who was away at a Commonwealth summit in Scotland at the time, and put in a woman leader for 2 years. And so it was a sort of woman-on-woman show for the 1999 general election. So that is the full story. But I spent just over 27 years in the New Zealand Parliament. 12 of them were years in opposition and 15 in government. So I guess in a democracy that's a pretty good run, isn't it, to have a career divided in that way. And every year of it, of course, valuable. You know, often I'd go and speak with university classes or high school classes or even primary school classes. People say, how do you get to be Prime Minister of your country? I say it's a long story, a very long story. And you have to start by doing all the little things before you get to do the big things. There's not many examples of people just parachuting in as with no track record. So it was a long story, and if anyone wants to hear about the long story, please ask at question time. But prior to going into the New Zealand Parliament, I came from a background of student and academic life. I spent 14 years of my life prior to going into Parliament at the University of Auckland, first as a student, and then a number of years as a lecturer in, guess what, the Political Studies Department. So I guess that was all a preparation as well. But I make the point because I very much appreciate the role that universities play in encouraging informed debate about issues, global issues, national issues. And this month I've been out and about around universities speaking at Oxford and the London School of Economics, at Georgetown University last week, and now with you. And one of the many reasons for doing that is that I hope in a student audience like this that there will be people who listen and who are part of course, a very interesting program here, who might think, gosh, I would like a career in development or international relations with the UN, because truly to keep our organisations vibrant, energetic, new ideas, we need to attract the best and brightest of each generation. And truly some very remarkable people have been through the international organisations of the UN. So maybe someone today will think, well, that could be me. I could have a career of that kind. So this program, of course, in this school has very strong ties to the UN. We are in the Dag Hammarskjöld auditorium, after all, which sums up the importance of the connection. A very, very important former Secretary General of the United Nations. And I know that the work of the United Nations Studies Program is about fostering a greater understanding of what happens in the UN, not so far from this very university. And the UN has, and this is the lead into what I want to say about development, a critical role in helping tackle the multiple crises which affect our world year in, year out, day in, day out, month in, month out. And we need a strong multilateral system to deal with these issues. The truth is, 1 decade into the 21st century, the world is rather struggling to come to grips with a whole lot of often interconnected problems. They affect all of us, and they impact particularly severely on development. Wouldn't take a genius to work out what the series of crises are. The world has just been through the worst economic recession and crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s, which my parents had etched in their memory. Go back just a couple of years to the very sharp increases in food prices, a food crisis, literally. And frankly, food prices are still at rather high levels. If you're a small food exporting country like New Zealand, of course, high food prices are a wonderful thing for your current account and gross domestic product. But what misery those very high prices are causing to so many people. In 2008, we also saw a huge spike in oil prices. Fantastic if you're an oil exporter, but most countries aren't. And so that impacts very severely, particularly on the developing countries. Then we have the ongoing climate issues, the climate disasters, alongside the many other natural disasters. Haiti, Chile, Turkey, so many collectively causing great loss of life and blighting development prospects. And then think around the world to the various wars and conflicts which throw development into reverse gear. It's very hard to get any traction on development, obviously in a war or conflict zone. Now, a number of those crises, of course, have impacted on developed countries as well. Don't tell me about it. I tried to run at a general election in 2008 when people were complaining about food prices, petrol prices, the first impact of the recession and so on. It's tough. And I also come from a country which experiences a wide range of natural disasters, flooding, heavy snow. We also have earthquakes, volcanic activity, etc. But what I know is a characteristic of developed countries is they have resilience. They have deep pockets. And it's the lack of deep pockets and the lack of resilience which makes these crises particularly damaging for the countries that I am very much focused on in my present role. And among, of course, the most vulnerable people who feel the impact of a crisis the most are the world's women. And I want to talk about the issues as they concern women in my comments to you tonight. I'm a very strong believer in sustainable routes out of poverty, requiring women to be full beneficiaries of their country's development progress and contributors to their country's development progress. If we sideline women, then we will miss development goals. If you sideline half the population, you cannot meet development goals. And yet, given a fair go, and I come from a country where the concept of a fair go is very important, women will be tremendous agents of change and forces for peace and development. Now, let me link this to the Millennium Development Goals and the forthcoming summit at the United Nations in September. Actually, not so long after Kofi Annan visited my country, he must have made a strong pitch to me to go to the Millennium Summit in New York, and I duly came up here at Kofi's command in September 2000 to sign the Millennium Declaration, make a short speech, and of course in the Millennium Declaration were the 8 Millennium Development Goals. Of course, when you sign goals which have a 15-year horizon, and it's year 2000, you think, well, that's 3 political lifetimes away. And never in my wildest dreams did I think I would end up as the administrator of the United Nations Development Programme and have it as a major mission to promote these goals. So here we are, 10 years down, 5 years to go, and we need to review how it's going. And I want to say, I believe the goals could be met, can be achieved, that there has been progress, but we've got a number of challenges. So let's talk about both sides of that. There have been sizable reductions in poverty and child mortality rates, and increases in primary school enrolment towards the universal primary schooling, and progress towards access to clean water. But that's at the global level. If we break it down, for example, on poverty, and if we took China's figures out of the equation, different story. The rise of hundreds of millions of people out of poverty in China is one of the most amazing stories of humankind. But if we just look at the figures without China, the numbers of people elsewhere who are living in extreme poverty is actually estimated to have increased between 1990 and 2005, and the Millennium Development Goals are set from 1990 through to 2015. And the World Bank is now telling us that because of the economic crisis, around 64 million more people this year will be living in extreme poverty, that's on under $1.25 a day, than would have been the case without the recession. So the recession is actually taking us backwards on that one. Hunger is on the rise as well. More than 1 billion people were estimated by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN to be chronically hungry last year. And those figures were up around 130 million people on the numbers prior to the food crisis. So, what to do? Well, obviously my organisation is working with many partners, partner governments, partner agencies, to see what could be done to accelerate progress on the goals. And that does tend to bring us back to gender, because where the goals struggle the most is where the needs and status of women are given a low priority. And I personally believe that investing in women and girls could well be the breakthrough strategy we're all grappling for to accelerate progress on the MDGs, because we see the investments that we make in women and in girls as being intergenerational in their effects. We can see that the level of education that a mother has will be a significant variable affecting her own children's later education attainment and opportunities. We can see the flow-on effects of education for girls for the future, supporting a reduction in child mortality and maternal mortality. We can see it improving better child nutrition. We can see it increasing women's ability to move out of poverty. There are just so many spin-offs from women having access to opportunity. I attended a very interesting lecture by Professor Frances Stewart of Oxford a couple of Friday nights ago here at the UN in New York. She is one who has been a mentor for and contributor to the Human Development Reports which UNDP produces each year. And she was producing empirical evidence that when you look at what is associated with successfully lifting human development for a country, a common factor appears to be good ratios girl-boy in education. In other words, where girls are getting access to education, this is lifting the ability of a whole country over time to lift its level of human development. Now, the good news is that the gender gap which has existed in primary school enrolment has been narrowing. In 1999, there were 91 girls in primary school for every 100 boys. That's now 95. On the other hand, we're seeing progress on equal enrolment in secondary education, rather slow, and some gaps there opening up. For example, sub-Saharan Africa, the ratio of girls to boys enrolment in secondary education actually has been seen to fall in recent years, so that is a concern. But one of the biggest concerns, and this will be quite a focus of debate around the Millennium Development Goals this year, is what is happening on maternal health. And the truth is, not enough. Don't want to bombard you with figures, but in 1990, the base year for the MDGs, for every 100,000 live births, live babies born, there were 480 women who died. By 2005, that had only reduced to 450. The Millennium Development Goal target for 2015 is 120. Well, on the course we're on, there's no way that you could remotely reach that goal. But I really don't feel we can passively sit by and say, well, isn't that terrible, that goal won't be met. It is appalling to me that somewhere in the world a woman dies every single minute from complications from pregnancy or childbirth. So we really do need to focus on how can we support women's sexual and reproductive health needs being met. We know that being able to give birth in a clean place with a skilled birth attendant can radically reduce those mortality rates, and we've got to focus on very simple things like that. I say simple, but of course they have to be funded, they have to be logistically supported, people have to be trained, medications need to be got to where they're needed. What seems like a simple intervention has a long train of things that have to be sequenced to make it happen. But my basic point is that for development to be sustainable, it has to meet women's needs as well. We need to expand women's economic opportunities, we need to strengthen the legal rights and status of women, and we need to ensure that women's voices are heard in decision making. And those three areas, the three main areas looked at in a recent report that I launched in Delhi, which is UNDP's Asia Pacific Human Development Report on Gender. And it states very firmly that the underrepresentation of women in the paid workforce has significant negative economic consequences, not just for women, but for whole countries, and suggests that raising the proportion of women in the paid workforce to the high levels seen in a number of developed countries would increase annual GDP in a number of the Asia-Pacific countries. Of course, it's an understatement to say that when women have decent work, it's not only the women who benefit, their families and their communities benefit a great deal as well. And by decent work, let's also be inclusive of the incredible potential of women as entrepreneurs from the micro level up. But to be successful, there's a number of obstacles which often have to be overcome. For example, can they access finance? It's not unknown in many countries for a woman to have her husband's signature to open a bank account. It's not unknown for women to be unable to hold title to land or to be unable to inherit land. And in the developing world, where so much of the farming is done by women, the inability to actually control the title to the land can be quite a significant issue. So removing those barriers certainly would help women's economic empowerment. These are areas that our development program works in. How can we narrow those gender gaps and tackle discrimination in the economy as elsewhere. We promote having women's needs reflected in national development planning, looking at issues like how the unpaid care work burden on women impacts on development, and what interventions would lessen the load which women carry. One example, there's been in West Africa quite a lot of work done on supplying diesel engines, small scale, in village communities. And often the diesel engine can reduce the amount of time which women spend on domestic chores by 2 to 6 hours a day. And of course the ability to access some electricity can also help a micro-business, can help the process of production. When you might say to me, diesel, what's progressive about that? Of course, many things can make diesel, biodiesel, for example. And I think going forward, the challenge will be to have ways of producing the diesel which will be clean ways too. But when we think about then pushing women's economic empowerment, we have to look at that second issue identified in our report, and that is legal empowerment. And we work across a range of countries on strengthening women's legal rights so that they are consistent with international norms and standards. We have an initiative, Legal Empowerment of the Poor, which works to expand the access of poor people to justice so that they can use the law to advance their rights and interests. UNDP hosted a commission to look at the legal empowerment of the poor with a number of eminent people on it, including former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. It's a good report and it's had a lot of influence on the work that we do. In Liberia, for example, and in Mozambique and Uganda, UNDP has been supporting an initiative around community land titles with special measures to protect the land claims of women and others who are vulnerable in the population. Now let me come to the importance of participation and decision making, because I have to say my personal experience is that until you get a critical mass of women in parliaments and in decision making, women's issues do not get priority. Women's voices are too lonely, too isolated. And in the case of my own country, I went into the parliament when the numbers of women doubled from 4 to 8. A very lonely, small band, completely marginalised. By the time I left, New Zealand usually had close to a third of its MPs women. It makes a tremendous difference because the issues are brought into the mainstream of political decision makers' attention. So I'm very committed to finding ways of supporting women to rise to positions of that kind around the world. And when all else fails, you have to consider quotas. You have to consider reserved seats to break the mould, to show that women can do these jobs and do them extremely well. And UNDP does support governments in drawing up legislation on these issues. I was recently in Papua New Guinea, where there is one woman member of parliament. She happens to be the one woman minister. And she came to UNDP and said, "Help, I'm lonely. I would like some peers." And so at her request, and of course with the agreement of Government of Papua New Guinea, we have supported Dame Carol Kivu to draw up a bill which would reserve 22 seats in the Papua New Guinea Parliament for women. And she hopes to get the support of her cabinet to take the bill to Parliament. That would take Papua New Guinea from obviously having under 1% of its MPs as women to around 17%, which would be pretty close to the global average. It's not the 30% that was envisaged as an international target, but that's progress. So we obviously wish her well. In Albania, we supported there the first ever legislative quota for women in their recent parliamentary elections, and that lifted the level of women's participation in their parliament from 7% to 16.4%. Again, it's short of the international target, but it represents incredible progress. And these are just some of the ways that we can be part of promoting women's voices being heard. And I'm a great advocate for helping to shatter the glass ceiling that women so often run up against, and then pave the way for other women to follow. I believe women's voices need to be heard on so many issues that confront the international community, whether it's climate change, the environment, international peace and conflict resolution. We played a part, for example, in the run-up to Copenhagen Climate Summit in the upskilling, training, workshopping with about 500 government women participants and NGO participants so that they could make a good contribution, an informed contribution. And many of them, of course, have taken that back home and have been able to feed into the debate there. Then there's what we can do to promote the role of women in peacekeeping and recovery from crisis. It's well accepted that women need to be involved in this area. Why? Well, in today's conflicts, civilians are the most affected. The majority of refugees and displaced persons are women and children. Women have perspectives. They have needs, they have issues. Yet they have been repeatedly marginalised in the recovery from conflict and disaster. Keeping the peace has traditionally been something that blokes do. Women have had very few seats at negotiating tables, too little say in the planning and the implementation of reconciliation processes, yet they have a great interest in it. So we are certainly part of the UN effort to involve women more at every stage of the peacekeeping, peace-building, peace-settling process. And we can point to good examples of where women have played critical roles in conflict-ridden nations as agents of change. Take Liberia, where women made major contributions to getting a peaceful resolution of the conflict there, pushing for the fighting factions to be disarmed even before the peace accord was signed. And of course that country went on to elect Africa's first woman president, which is something of which they can be very, very proud. In Somalia, UNDP has worked with women to support them to be part of national reconciliation processes. Can't be tougher than there, including supporting women being part of drafting the new constitution. We helped establish a task force with the Ministry of Women's Affairs there so that Somali women's voices could be heard. But let me come to a very serious issue, and that is the issue of sexual and gender-based violence, which is such a part of so many conflicts now. And unfortunately, for many women, that doesn't end when a war or conflict ends. A pattern has been established, almost the debasement of the society where this horrible problem carries on. The UN has been very active in the Security Council on the issue of addressing systemic sexual violence in conflict. And I'm told, Elisabeth, that you took students to the Security Council yourself to witness the passing of Resolution 1888 on sexual violence. There has just been the first ever UN Under-Secretary General appointed to work on this issue of sexual violence and conflict. So that shows how seriously the Secretary General and the system are taking those issues. She is Margot Wallström, a former Swedish minister, most recently Vice President of the European Commission in Brussels, and I think she'll do a fantastic job. Our part, well, we're one of many players in this area, but we do work, for example, in countries like Democratic Republic of the Congo, where we've trained paralegals and people who can advise and support survivors of sexual violence in their interactions with the police and the courts. And also we've engaged with traditional community leaders to help reintegrate the victims of sexual violence back into their communities. In Timor-Leste, UNDP has been part of supporting the development of specialised units within the police there to prevent gender-based violence. Now, when we talk about recovery from crisis, I've focused my comments on the crisis that comes from conflict and war, but let me now comment on the recovery from natural disaster and use the specific case of Haiti itself, which I know, as I said earlier, the school has had a connection with. And I understand back in 2008, students from this program undertook a research project that was looking at how the UN mission there was responding to the pressures on Haitian people of the high food prices and also the aftermath of the previous disaster, which was the devastating hurricane of that year. So now another huge and terrible crisis, obviously. Our part is early recovery. UNDP is not a humanitarian agency, we're a development agency, but there's a point of crossover that you have an emergency phase, you start to move into early recovery. We start there. And we've started with job creation programs, which have been basically called cash for work. You might say, well, why wouldn't you be paid if you work? That's the philosophy. There weren't too many jobs around Port-au-Prince after the disaster of that earthquake. And so we came in to work with local organisations on job creation, to create temporary work, clearing rubble, resorting, seeing what could be reused, just basic work like that, so people could get some cash income, spend it in the local stalls and market, help revive the economy, but do some important work at the same time. So there's multiple benefits from something like that. Now, over the past few weeks, we've been involved as part of the effort to do the post-disaster needs assessment. This is a very formal thing that happens after a disaster in a developing country. The agencies come together, UN, World Bank, European Commission comes in, the Regional Development Bank, to do this formal assessment. And fundamental to this is to build back better in Haiti so that it is more resilient to future shocks of all kinds. One of the key objectives we have is to see that the future disaster risk reduction measures are gender sensitive. We obviously are concerned that women and girls and vulnerable groups should get the protection and security that they deserve and badly need, and to see that women's voices again are heard in the recovery and reconstruction process. And we do have around 40% of the people in the job creation programs are actually women, which is good. Pity it's not 50, but 40 is certainly a start in this context. So long way to go in Haiti. Tomorrow at the UN, the donors will be asked for $3.864 billion for the next 18 months. The total cost is estimated at $11 billion, but a strategic decision has been made not to ask for that right now, but to go for the $3.84 billion, get the work started, and then we will need to come back to donors again. It's obviously very, very expensive. Can I say one last word on the issue of the UN and what's happening with women? There is going to be a new agency to promote gender equality set up. It does not yet have a name. It's talked about as the composite gender entity. Well, obviously you can't go forward with the UN composite gender entity. We'll have to have a name that's catchy and appealing. But what it's going to do is draw together 4 different parts of the UN system into a strengthened agency for women. UNIFEM, which many of you will know of, INSTRAW, which is based in the Dominican Republic and does research on women, and then the people in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs who service the Committee on the Status of Women, and also the Office of the Special Advisor on Women. So 4 dots for women are being drawn together into one composite agency, and it's expected to attract rather more funding than UNIFEM has in the past, and we hope it's going to be a big help in promoting the advancement of women, not only in developing countries, but actually worldwide, because let's not pretend developed countries are perfect on any of these issues, and the UN Committee on the Status of Women is very much looking at the position of women around the world. So in conclusion, as I was asked, I've focused my comments around issues pertaining to women in development. Obviously, I think that promoting the rights of women is a good thing in its own right, should be done. Basic human right, equality is an important principle to me. But I can also say that if we achieved that happy state of affairs, it would be very good for development. If we don't include the whole population in the progress countries are making, we're really selling ourselves short. And I hope that's a message that those of you who go into this field will take with you when you complete your studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I can see students are already lining up for questions. But before we do, this is the Haiti team. But before we do that, I just wanted to thank you very much for this very inspiring, so to speak, call for the empowerment of women. I must say, having been at the UN for close to 30 years and hearing that finally there is an agency after years, as you know, of negotiations on this, and also seeing the Security Council resolution, which came on violence against women, which Hillary Clinton came to pass at the UN with the Security Council, is really exciting. I have many questions for you, but I just wanted to tell you that when I take students to the Security Council, I must say I'm a little bit ashamed. It has improved, but I remember last year entering the council with a group of 50 students or so and seeing this council, which was all men, and then looking at a picture of 1945, the first Security Council, all men, and I thought, but what are we doing wrong? And at some point, Madeleine Albright had created, when she was the ambassador of the United States at the UN, had created the G4, the Girl Force. There were 4 women ambassadors for 192 countries. And I think they are doing much better now, but in New York, it was always difficult because it's the political world. They do better in Geneva with the humanitarian world, but here it has really been difficult. But now there is the ambassador of the United States, who is a woman, obviously, and there is the ambassador of Nigeria and Brazil. So we are doing better in the council. But, you know, when they are not there, and you look at this Security Council and you think, so talking about the need for women in decision-making process in the political world, it's still a man's world. And one of the questions I had before we really go to development issues was to ask, you have been the Prime Minister of New Zealand, you talked about the need for critical mass, the difficulty in a way to play the game that the men set when there is no critical mass, and I must say this has been my experience at the UN in the political world. How do you do that? You have to survive in the political world of men, and at the same time you would like to not to play the game but to change the game, and it's extremely difficult. So my question to you, and then I will open the floor to students, is what is it that, as the Prime Minister of New Zealand, as the first woman at the head of UNDP, what is it that you found the most difficult, and what do you think is your comparative advantage?
I'm going to stand up because after all these years of being a politician and university teacher, I always stand up to speak. So you ask a very interesting question, because where women have been a rarity in positions like Parliament or leadership, there is a glass ceiling, and you have to break your way through it. And I found, I'm a baby boomer. I come out of, post-war baby boom in New Zealand. We were such a lucky generation. We had access to tertiary education. The world was our oyster. It never occurred to me that there was any barrier in the way of anything I wanted to do. I sailed through university. I became a lecturer. I went into Parliament. But when I went to Parliament, I started to hear things like, oh, she won't win that electorate, it's a working man's seat. Well, the working men, most of them had wives, but it was a working man's seat. She won't go down at the Return Services Club and the bowling club. Of course, there were women's bowling clubs as well, and return service women, but it was, sort of starting to raise these kinds of issues. But anyway, I mean, got over that and went on. And then when I became the leader of my party, it all came out again. People said, oh, she'll never succeed as a leader because she doesn't drink at night with the men. You're right. I sometimes talk about going into the New Zealand Parliament, which had all the characteristics of a gentleman's club. You know, when you walk into one of these university clubs, the Yale Club or the Harvard Club downtown, you've got the leather armchairs, and it's redolent of sort of men-only clubs around the Western world. And so I go into the New Zealand Parliament at the age of 31, and I discovered 3 forms of recreation. One exercised this muscle at the bar. Another one exercised this muscle at the billiards team. And another one exercised these muscles with the poker schools at night. Well, truly, I was a young woman out of university. Did any of this appeal to me? No. So in a sense, you have to redefine the political culture. And over time, you have to educate the media that you're not going to behave like that. You're not going to be one of those boys, because that's not you, and you wouldn't be true to yourself. And whatever you are in public life, if you're not true to yourself, people will see that. They will see that you've put on an act in order to be something. So I think you have to be true to yourself, and it takes a lot of education of your media. And certainly when I became the leader, the media complained her voice was too low. I've actually got a bit of a sore throat today, so it's particularly low. They don't like what you wear. They don't like the way your hair's cut. I mean, endlessly picky. Are these things ever said about men? How many men do you hear criticised for having a high voice? How many men's haircuts do you hear criticised in public life? Well, there's suits. I mean, by and large, people are listening more to what they say. So you have to work quite hard for your appearance not to be an issue, not to be a distraction. So, all of those things have to be dealt with. But I like to think that as more women deal with them, as more women get to the top, these things become so obviously petty, silly and ridiculous that they're never raised again. So you just have to demonstrate by doing, and by the power of ideas and your message, I guess, that you can do the job, and you're going to do it your way. It's the only way you can do it. Otherwise, you'll come across as a bit phony. That's my experience.
Okay, perhaps we should open. You have to know that usually, as you probably know, I have big panels with a lot of speakers. Tonight I decided to have just Helen Clark so that you would have a chance to have a dialogue with her and ask her all the questions you have, because if there are too many speakers, there is not enough time. So now it's your time, and you've got to just line up at the microphone.
So my enthusiasm is a reflection of my interest in your lecture, which was very stimulating, very hopeful and uplifting. Just to briefly echo something that Professor Lindenmayer said, of course I was one of the students with her in Haiti, and I just want to again emphasize on behalf of the students just a thank you to Kim Bolduc and all the UNDP team in Haiti, and I just wanted to convey that as well on behalf of the students, just to reiterate what Professor Lindenmayer said. Obviously, my interest is on Haiti, looking at the conference upcoming tomorrow here in New York. 2 brief questions. You can choose to answer either one. The first is, what can be done in terms of improving the economic empowerment of women, if you can provide additional details, specifically the entrepreneurial skills of women in terms of leading job creation in Haiti as we move forward? And the second question is touching on the issue of natural disaster risk reduction and environmental vulnerability. In the PDNA, I think close to 15% of the budget is allocated towards natural disaster risk reduction. I was just curious if you had any views or could provide any insights on what role the private sector could be playing in terms of ecosystem restoration, reforestation, through projects such as mango planting or other types of fruit tree planting that will both create jobs in the agricultural sector and also address these underlying environmental vulnerabilities.
Well, I'm not the expert on Haiti, but obviously the last 2.5 months I've learnt more about it than I could ever possibly have foreseen. And I think on the disaster risk management, there seem to me to be two main areas. One is how you live around a hurricane-prone environment, and the other is how you live around an earthquake-prone environment. You know, I mean, I come from a country which is also built on fault lines. You come to our Parliament building in New Zealand, it's all on kind of stabilisers, and we have a lot of shakes, and our building goes like this. But, you know, so one of the things clearly Haiti needs going forward to try and proof itself against that risk is a building code which will be enforced so that it can withstand shakes. And it's very easy to say that, but the code has to be designed, and then the system of inspection and enforcement has to work, and that's not going to be easy, but it's pretty basic. There's no point building back what was there. That's not the essence of building back better. So that's the first point. On the mitigation around the risk from hurricanes, yes, you put your finger on it. It's the catchment issues, it's the reforestation issues. Haiti's back country needs something to hold the water as it falls. Its forest is stripped out. You ask about private sector role. Well, I think the private sector role is very important going forward. I mean, clearly there's going to be a lot of work for private sector companies with the rebuild. But one could envisage, for example, that there might be some interest in commercial forestry. I imagine with the rain Haiti gets, trees will grow, although the soil is heavily degraded, as we know. But it may be that reforestation, which allows over time for some form of selective logging, might be a way forward. So let's hope people look for creative opportunities of that kind. When President Clinton was appointed as special envoy by the Secretary General last year, one of his main interests was in seeing if he could attract private investment to Haiti, because while it's important, I think, to talk about the economy from the micro level up, the reality is that no developed country is without a strong private sector, and some of that should be international investment. Let's hope we can also grow the domestic investment and wealth base as well, but that's a long-term cause.
Before we move to the next question, I just wanted to abuse the chair maybe and to ask you: do you know to what extent has the issue of women be taken care of, or have been? What is the importance of it in the post-disaster need assessment? Because I remember Clinton in the Security Council when he came, Bill Clinton, in September, saying that this was really important and there would be a lot of attention given to the issue of women in Haiti. But when I look at the PDNA, I didn't find that this issue was really highlighted. Neither did I find that really the soft issues like health, education, had been put as priorities by the government, to the extent that this is a government plan. And we were again into the infrastructure and the rebuilding of houses and which is absolutely important, I agree. But I mean, where are those issues? The issue of women, where is it hidden in the PDNA? I would like to know what is going to happen tomorrow, if anybody is going to mention it at all as a priority. And regarding the reforestation, the Haitians cut the trees because of poverty, obviously, and they need the trees because they have no alternative kind of source of energy. So that's the way they cook, and it's nice to replant trees, but if we cannot propose to them an alternative to that, they will continue to cut trees because of poverty. So is this issue being looked at in a more comprehensive way as energy, not only for reforestation?
Yes, and after the 2008 hurricane, there was work being put in place to address the issue of alternative energy, because clearly the forests have been cut down for fuel, for charcoal, and unless you can provide a different fuel source. Anything you plant will have the same fate. So alternative fuels are obviously very important. I mean, I'll certainly be mentioning the importance of women and girls tomorrow, but it may well be that the PDNA has more of a focus on that physical reconstruction. But then you come back to the long-term presence of the UN development agencies and the UN country team and our work to promote inclusive development, green development, the needs of the more marginalised, which includes women and girls. I mean, it brings me back to the previous question, which I didn't fully answer the first part, about what can be done on the economic empowerment of women in Haiti. Well, let's start with girls and education. It'd be great to get all girls back into a schoolroom for a start. Let's ensure that the job creation that's being done in the short term gives women a fair shake. Let's look at the possibilities for supporting women's entrepreneurship. And, microcredit, of course, has its critics, but it's been pretty important in getting a lot of women into small business and trading activity. Let's look at the opportunities that come from the reconstruction stage for women to be skilled to be able to take the jobs. I think there's a whole lot of angles, but I suspect it's going to be the long-term work of the UN country team and the interested NGOs and donors almost as ongoing business to be addressing these issues when the recovery reconstruction will have almost inevitably a pretty heavy physical emphasis. But having said that, I think everyone will emphasise that unless what is planned enjoys the support not only of the government of Haiti but of Haitian people, it's not going to go very far. So getting that buy-in, support, consent is pretty important.
What happened to Stephen? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Clark, for presenting us to your views. I have two questions, actually. One is about the gender issue and women issue that you have raised. Working in development world, I work for UN Population Fund, and being in everyday work involved in that, I becoming a bit of concerned with this, if I may call it so, womanization of gender. Not in the sense that the men should also be given all those 3 points that you access to education, financial resources, and government, but probably they should be given access to understanding why involving women and giving that access to women would be more useful for everybody. And in that case, probably we can avoid this notion of the guy who is giving his signature for his wife to open the account. So that he probably start to understand it's not part of life. And so the question is, should we also involve men in all this adventure? Or not? I mean, how we should deal with that? And the second question is on Haiti. Haiti has proved that sometimes, unfortunately, in development world, we are not very successful with some countries. Because Haiti have been receiving the aid since the beginning of entering of this notion of international aid. And still, Haiti is one of the most poorest countries in the world. It's almost to the number that women, the maternal mortality hasn't been improved very much. I mean, it's almost the same thing. I mean, should we start thinking to work in different ways so that after this, that Haiti can be improved? I mean, this fragility of the state, which was always there, and we were always supporting Haiti to become more stronger state, but never succeeded in that. Thank you.
Well, look, on the two questions, yes, of course, the support of men and boys is absolutely critical to getting the changes for women. If you don't have that support, you're not going to be able to make the changes. So men have to be involved, and hopefully in a positive way. Secondly, on doing things differently within and with Haiti, I think inherent in this approach after this disaster is a recognition that there needs to be support for more decentralised government, that power needs to be pushed out from Port-au-Prince, that the economy needs to be more decentralised. I think you'll find that coming through as quite a strong theme. My understanding is it's been a country where the capital's been pretty dominant. The government's been weak, but the capital's been dominant and sucked in people and to resources to the extent there's been resources. So I think you'll see a more decentralised approach. But it is going to be very important to support government having the capacity to try to rise to the huge tasks that are there, not only the central government, but out in the districts and localities as well. You know, UNDP has 4 main areas of work, and every single one of them is relevant to Haiti. Crisis prevention and recovery, governance, poverty reduction and MDGs. Haiti wouldn't be on track for a single MDG. And then the climate, environment, energy issues. Every single part of our mandate is highly relevant. And we're very committed to try and make a difference in a systemic way.
Hi, I wondered if you might comment on something I feel you're uniquely placed to answer, having led our country for 9 years and now leading an agency that is responsible for trying to address global problems. You mentioned at the start of your talk that we're in an era of some intractable collective global problems, things like financial crises, food crises, climate change. But if you observe multilateral negotiations, you soon observe that states very often pursue their own national interests. And sometimes this is at the detriment of trying to achieve collective solutions to global problems or to address things that don't directly relate to their material interests. I don't think the problem is that we can't address collective issues. If you look at the financial crisis, trillions were mobilized in a very short space of time to try and respond to that crisis. But if you look at other crises that are facing us, there hasn't been the political will to actually address them. Now, I wonder if you might be able to comment, because of your background, on some methods that we might be able to employ to help states and governments, encourage them to transcend their national interests and start focusing on some of the collective issues that we face.
Well, I think the trick is to show the connections between your national interest and what's happening beyond your shores, because the world is actually very small. The world is shrinking. We are very interconnected, and problems don't stay in a ghetto, right? They don't stay behind national boundaries. They jump boundaries. They jump boundaries of states, boundaries of class, ethnicity, faith, gender. Once there's a concentration of problems, it doesn't stay there. It becomes our problem. And one could think of many examples of that. For example, look at the migration debate. What drives migration out of the developing world to the developed world? Lack of opportunity. So poverty, desperation, then create problems on borders with the human misery for those who don't make it across a border, whether it's land or sea, the exploitation often of those who do make it over the border, then the undercutting perhaps of wage rates locally. There's just so many issues. So if you go back to what is the source of the problem, it's the push factor, because people haven't got the ability to make a decent living at home. So that should focus us on how can we support that and deal with the pressures on the developed countries by going back to the heart of the problem. It's a bit the same with disease, isn't it? Disease doesn't stay behind national boundaries. If TB gets a fresh lease of life with these killer bugs, it can be on a plane and in any country, any time. Swine flu, bird flu, SARS, etc. Why do you need to support the building of effective public health systems? Because you can hopefully close down an epidemic or serious illness before it really spreads, causing misery not only in a country but well beyond the borders. Think, for example, of natural resource issues like the world's fisheries and the international issues around that. We're depleting our oceans. We can't deal with that on the national level. It's got to be dealt with internationally. So there's just so many ways in which our neighbour's problem becomes our problem, whoever we are, wherever we are. And I think it's up to political leaders to try to draw those connections and say, look, we can't blame people for the situation that they're in. Let's look at the structural factors. Let's look at how we could help address those, because if we can't address problems at source, they're going to be growing problems for us. It's in our enlightened self-interest, apart from any moral or philanthropic imperative. It's in our enlightened self-interest to support multilateralism and development. And if you want to go further on the enlightened self-interest, the truth is that developing countries prospering, people having bigger incomes, that's larger markets to be traded into, traded across. The demographics of most Western countries are of declining populations, aging populations. The growth and vibrancy of population is in the developing world. Huge markets if people have money in their pocket. So again, that kind of enlightened self-interest could be looked at. I mean, what's spearheading the international recovery at the moment? China, India, huge populations, generating demand, rising middle classes. Let's hope it translates more for people at the bottom of the ladder as well. But my own country was the first Western one to sign a free trade agreement with China. Why did we do that? We can see the potential of China. Why wouldn't you want a first mover advantage in a market like that? That's enlightened self-interest for us. But it will also, it's one of many tiny things in our case, which is also supportive of China's development.
Yes.
Hello, thank you. I'm not going to ask about Haiti. I'm a first-year student in development, so I wanted to ask about business and entrepreneurship as a way to empowering women. And I was reading earlier about the partnership of UNDP with SIDA in the Turkey program for building the business and the technical skills for the Fashion Week, and many Turkey women are being empowered through that. And I wanted to ask you, I personally believe business empowerment for women is a terrific way, a tangible result in actually accomplishing not only MDG 1 related to poverty, but thereby, because they're the backbones of their families in Southeast Asia or Africa, it's also MDG 2 and MDG 5. So I wanted to ask you, what is your view into more of those partnerships or public-private partnerships, how the private sector plays a role? And for those of us who are graduating and going into development, what would be your recommendation into the business factor as in this topic with women?
Oh, I think it's replete with opportunity, because you're right. I mean, entrepreneurial activity, rather than looking for someone to give you a job, that's often not that easy in many places. But the opportunity to start a business, to get the skills to do it, to support women to do that, the access to credit, the legal changes that can facilitate it, the mentoring and support, I think there's fantastic opportunity. You would know more about the initiative in Turkey than I do, because we have 166 programs, countries around the world with thousands of different initiatives. But from what you described, I'm pleased to hear that UNDP is involved with it, and particularly at that high end in fashion. It's an incredible area for women to be getting into, a very high value area. So no, I think there's work to be done, and wish you well in developing a career opportunity around it.
Okay. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Alessandra Bravi, and I'm an ex-SIPA student and actually employee of UNDP. So I would like to ask you a question that doesn't regard Haiti or development, but first of all, thank you very much for your speech. It was very inspiring, especially when you talk about your experience as a Prime Minister entering in the when you were entering the Parliament in New Zealand as the first woman in the Gentlemen's Club. I was wondering, as being the first woman administrator of the UNDP, how are you using this momentum to promote gender mainstream, but not also in the rest of the world, but within the organization? How are you using to promote women leadership and retain women employees? That is still something that the UN is struggling doing.
Well, UNDP does have a gender strategy in its human resources, obviously, human relations department, staff management, and yeah, they're expected to live up to that and nurture and support women. There's been quite a big effort to increase the number of women who are resident representatives and resident coordinators, which is, of course, a very senior leadership position, usually the top UN official in a developing country. And as you know, at the senior management level of UNDP, women are extremely well represented. Obviously, the administrator is female, the associate administrator is female. We have another 3 Assistant Secretary General level positions that are female as well. So I think a strong tone is set from the top, and that's certainly important to me. But you rely on strong messaging, and then your human resources people to drive that strategy through.
Can I ask you a question to follow up on what you said? How did you do it with a special representative? With the resident, the coordinators, I mean, because when I was at the UN, there were not too many women yet, and then you introduced this exam, I believe, where I think when there are exams, women compete very well. You can see how well they do, and then I think through that exam, you attracted quite a few women. But can you just say a little bit, how did you improve those numbers? Because they were pretty low at some point. And I think the agencies are doing so much better than the Secretariat, the UN Secretariat in terms of women, because you are the first woman at the head of UNDP, but the other agencies did pretty well in terms of women, being UNICEF or UNFPA or WHO with Brundtland and so on. WFP has UNRWA and so on. So the agencies do quite well, but you are right that this is one of the best jobs at the UN, to be a res rep or to be a special representative in a peacekeeping operation. So in peacekeeping we didn't do well. I mean, at some point there was simply no special representative woman. Now we have one in Liberia with the former ambassador of Denmark.
And in Timor-Leste.
And Timor-Leste, exactly. And there are a few deputy special representatives coming, but it's still extremely difficult, and the UN doesn't do well for leadership and women. So from your experience at UNDP, how did you improve those numbers? And what about your LEAD program? You have a LEAD program at UNDP where SIPA students, as a matter of fact, can apply and be trained. I think this is fantastic. It doesn't exist in the Secretariat. We don't invest in the Secretariat, in the staff, as much as you do as an agency. So I wonder if you could say, what does it take to have women res rep?
Well, I think you're right. The agencies and funds and programs are quite progressive in this respect, in the way in which they do try to attract in talent in an even-handed way. But some of the changes which led to this significant increase in women as resident reps, obviously they've occurred before I came, but you're right. There was an assessment required. Now, very few organisations require people to undergo a full assessment or exam, if you like, in order to reach a top position. But this was what was introduced in the development system. And there were people who had been resident reps, resident coordinators before, who failed it and could not ever be posted again as a resident representative. But you may be right that may have been a factor in women coming up through, women thinking, gosh, I can have a go at that. I can get into that pool. And once in the pool, of course, the women get, absolutely fair consideration. And the way it's done is it comes through an interagency steering committee. The different agencies have reps on. Then it comes to me, and I make a decision what name to take to the Secretary General. But it's been quite a significant process. I should say to people that I know a student audience like this, people come from many different countries. A number of countries do support young people coming into the funds programs and agencies through the Junior Professional Officer program. Not all, but quite a lot. And basically the government concern puts up the money. Sam, who's with me tonight, you came in, did you come in as a JPO? No, you didn't. But South Africa doesn't. But anyway, there's others around, people from Germany, Sweden, Denmark, etc., who came in as junior professional officers and then got a foot on the ladder. You came in as a JPO? Which country? Italy, fantastic. Yeah. Well, you see that, and that gives those countries really a leg up in getting their nationals into the system if they're prepared to sponsor in. We're talking to a wider range of countries now about doing that. For example, we're talking to China. Wasn't China sponsor JPOs? It would be fantastic. We have very few people from the People's Republic of China in the international stream of the organisation. So it is a way to get in at the bottom level.
Karina?
Good evening. Thank you for coming here tonight. I wanted to ask you what you see is the comparative advantage of UNDP vis-à-vis many other development actors, and many of them have a lot more money also than UNDP. And then also maybe related to that, given that coordination is one of the greatest challenges, coordination of these development actors, how do you see UNDP addressing this challenge in particular? Thank you.
Well, no one else in the UN system has more money than UNDP because we're the big agency and the lead agency with a wider presence and a far bigger budget than anybody else. We do work in 166 countries. We have 135 country bases. Some are multi-country offices, obviously. And in a sense, that's a comparative advantage in itself because we have a global network. There's a lot of agencies which cannot be resident in a country. UNDP will represent their interests. It's as simple as that. So there's de facto a leadership role from being the big agency. But more than that, UNDP formally is also leading the coordination system. So the UNDP resident rep is also the resident coordinator for the UN in country, coordinates the country team, has a support office around that. And we take that pretty seriously because the basic message is that we'll get more development impact if we work together rather than have a whole lot of agencies beavering away on their little bit. We need to work across agencies. And just to give you an example of what that can mean, I went to the ILO in Geneva last week speaking to their governing council because UNDP's executive board has directed that we should very actively support ILO with the Global Jobs Pact, which is exciting. But we need to work together on that. And ILO, of course, isn't resident in most of the world's developing countries, but we are. So in a sense, we use their technical expertise in country to roll out programs and initiatives. So that's pretty important to us. But in terms of other comparative advantage, we have our areas of mandate. They're determined by our board, and they are in those 4 areas I mentioned: crisis prevention and recovery. There aren't other agencies in the UN system with that comprehensive mandate, nor governance is another specialty. The climate, environment, energy issues, we're the only development agency with that as a specific mandate, but we need to work closely then with the UN Environment Programme and others whose work will have a bearing on it. And then poverty reduction MDGs, again, a core part of the mandate. So those are all things where people will look to UNDP and say, if you want to be active in these areas, we're the partner.
Annika?
Hi, my name is Annika. And I wanted to ask you, following up on the coordination questions, about the dynamic between security and development at the UN. And I wanted your frank assessment on how those 2 branches work together. We know about integrated peacekeeping missions, but we understand that sometimes it's hard for one to inject their interests into the other. Could you talk about that a little?
Yes, it can be difficult because, you know, if you take a situation like Afghanistan, you've got a UN country team there trying to work on the sorts of things I've been talking about tonight, but they're in a war zone, and there's a UN mission there, and the UN mission's mandate from the Security Council is to, you know, liaise closely with NATO, which, you know, NATO, after all, has the mandate for the International Security Assistance Force from the Security Council. So almost immediately you've set up tension, haven't you? Because you've got the humanitarian and development people who don't want to be linked to anything that's linked to a military operation. And that has played out in a number of countries. There's countries I've visited where, you know, if you get them in the same room, the people from the UN military mission and the development humanitarian agencies will be like that, in great disagreement. So when you try to integrate these missions, it can be difficult. However, I mean, you know, there's various degrees of success with that. Some missions have outstanding leadership, which is fully inclusive of and empathetic with and understanding the needs of the humanitarian and development agencies, and that works pretty well. But sometimes you get strong personalities on both sides. It's just a clash, and that then exacerbates that underlying tension. So I'm tempted to say it will ever be thus.
Yeah. For the students who don't know what an integrated mission is, it's a term which was used in peacekeeping operation because you have the peacekeepers and you have the special representative at the top, and in the past you just had the peacekeepers, and now you have the agencies who are also under the leadership of the special representative. And as Helen was saying, you know, the peacekeepers, the peacekeeping operation takes its mandate from the Security Council, and the humanitarian people, the agencies, don't. So that's the first source of problem. And also this perennial issue that, you know, immaculate intervention, so to speak, that a lot of humanitarian people have, and they don't want to be seen with soldiers doing what they do. They think that it really is counterproductive for them. So there are lots of issues. It was an idea that Brahimi recommended in his report to make a connection between security and development. And it started with Sierra Leone in 2000. Whether that has worked a lot at the UN is linked to personalities, as you said. And if you have somebody in UNDP and somebody in peacekeeping who don't agree on many things, as it happened in Haiti, well, then the mission is not integrated and it doesn't work, and it creates a lot of tension. So there are good examples and bad examples of this integration, but I agree with you, it's not really yet there. So you are next.
Hi, thank you for coming. I wonder if you could speak about the challenges, if there are any special challenges to empowering women and development in extremely traditional societies. For example, I've spoken with a lot of people who've served in Afghanistan in one capacity or another, and a common attitude seems to be like, you don't go into Afghanistan and start talking to people about sending girls to school unless you want to get a lot of people hurt. You better deal with their understanding of right and wrong, unless you just want to take casualties. And specifically, do you think that is there like a tipping point at which it becomes easier, like some stage in the process where it becomes a lot easier to approach people in general about empowering women?
Well, I think it's important not ever to come in and impose things. I think what you do has to be working with people. And in the case of the issues we're talking about tonight, it's working with the women. There will be women's voices struggling to be heard, working to support them to be heard, to inject their perspective on how things could or should be done. And you'll find in all societies incredible women who you know, with some support can articulate on behalf of the voiceless. But I don't think you can come in and impose a set of values. You know, I think it's got to come from the bottom up, but you can work with that. And then to come to your question about a tipping point, at a certain point you get momentum. It becomes more normal for girls and women to be doing certain things. That encourages others. You know, I mean, let's not think that these issues are foreign to developed societies either. I mean, I was the first woman in my family to go to university. I would say that really probably up until the 1980s in New Zealand, many families wouldn't have thought supporting their daughters to university would have been a priority at all. So attitudes have changed fast in my country, fast in this country. Maybe not fast enough. I mean, as a woman anywhere near being President of the United States of America, ask yourself, what are some of the real barriers that women face in a range of societies? So I just regard this as work in progress, but where my heart is in supporting women to have their voice heard. And to have your voice heard, you have to be in a decision-making structure, whatever that structure is.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. I don't study women or development, so
Can
I might
you
be in the wrong
introduce
room.
yourself?
My name is
Yes.
Kat Thompson. I'm a doctoral student in education policy at Teachers College here, but I actually have done some work on New Zealand. I guess I'm very interested in your point where you made the connection between improving the role of women and the connection between decentralization and the role of women. And what I study myself is the appropriate venue for policymaking, things like social policy or public policy, and the jurisdictions between federal and, say, provincial or state levels and local regional levels. And I'm wondering if you could expand a wee bit on the role of decentralization that you mentioned earlier in bringing decision-making to the localized level and hopefully incorporating more women in that process. And then, ideally an outcome being that you would have improved the situation across any social policy area, for example. So I want to know as well if that is tied to 20 years of decentralization in New Zealand with education, for example, as part of why you mentioned that earlier. Thanks.
Well, I think you make a very important point that often the entry point for women into decision making is precisely at the local level. And if I look at my own country's experience, women were starting to enter local government in significant numbers long before they got into the parliament in significant numbers. So it was a training ground for some women who went on, but it was also, I suppose, the fact that women were in local government mainstreamed women's participation. So then there are expectations that women can do it at other levels as well. So I think in principle the process of decentralisation, of greater competence to lower levels, subnational levels of government, will be positive for the empowerment of women. That the barriers for women going from having very little representation to some will be lower at the lowest level than they were at the higher levels. Now, I'll give the case of India again. India, that I mentioned in my talk, is debating at the moment having a third of all the seats in Parliament reserved for women. It's passed through the upper house. One hopes it will go through the lower house. But since 1992, their law has required that 1/3 of all the women on the local councils, these local village level councils, are women. And there's quite an interesting study done of a couple of the states where women actually came to be the majority on the councils. And these councils are immensely more likely, I think 60% more likely, to prioritise water schemes and water initiatives and clean water. Women addressing very, very basic needs. I mean, think of our hierarchy of basic needs. We need food, we need shelter, we need water, etc. Whereas councils with a majority of men hadn't prioritised these things nearly as much. The evidence points to that. In terms of empowerment of women, again, linking things in India, with the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme there, where the rural poor are guaranteed their 100 days minimum work a year at a minimum wage, the decision making on what jobs are done for that work is pushed out to the village council level. And so you can link then to the women having an input into what are the jobs that are going to be done in the community, what are the priorities. And I must say, where I went to look at the scheme in action and saw women working, it was precisely around water initiatives. So, no, I think you raised an important point. Decentralisation, in principle, will be positive for women's entry to decision making.
Hi, I'm Michelle Lau. I'm an alumna here at SIPA. Thank you, Professor Lindenmayer, for convening this opportunity, and thank you, Helen, for coming to speak with us, taking the time to speak with us today. My question is, I guess it's a little bit more personal. I was really excited to hear that there's going to be a new super women's organization at the UN that hopefully will be more powerful, and certainly I think it's necessary to have a dedicated organization for issues like rape used as a weapon of war or maternal mortality rates, high maternal mortality rates. But I think to your point about raising critical mass, I think it's really important to have women in mainstream power structures and decision-making structures, whether it's in finance or politics. And as someone who's successfully kind of reached the top, and what are some of the strategies or the culture-changing tactics that you mentioned, and what is the culture that you feel like you had to kind of overcome? Were you always a champion of women's issues? Were you always aware of how important the role of women is in development? I just wanted to get kind of your personal perspective on I mean, how you came to realize the importance of women in development.
Well, in terms of personal experience, the sort of the wave of women baby boomers who went into politics in New Zealand did have tremendous support from other women. Women did organise to support other women, and I think that was very, very important. And I do think that women's networks are very powerful in supporting women, and in every sort of stream, really. Over my lifetime, I've addressed countless women's organisations, women in business, women in the law, women in accountancy, women in education, women in health, etc. So I think all this, the networking is extremely important. But yeah, look, I come out of a sort of strong social democratic, social and economic justice background, and it's fundamental to me that women have equal opportunity and equal rights, and I apply that to my job and development as I applied it to leadership and involvement in my own country. It's a strong value base that I'm coming from.
I just wanted to ask you about these MDGs. To what extent do you think that member states really have come to the realization that they cannot reach the MDGs without the women, particularly in Africa, because it's so important in a way that they are involved and that we do something for the women if we want to reach this MDG? Do you have the impression that in the international community, this is a new paradigm which has sunk in? I mean, in peacekeeping, it's coming more and more. You have this group of Indian policemen in Liberia, which got a lot of reviews recently in the press, showing why it is important to have women in peacekeeping, because women, so many women are raped. They need women to talk. I mean, there has been a lot, but I was wondering about. It's nearly a new paradigm that you would bring development. You could achieve those goals through the women. And how much do you think this is really in the discourse of the international community? And related to this question then, were there any women working on the PDNA on Haiti?
Well, as to your question, is it in the discourse? Is the paradigm accepted? I'd say early days. Early days. I mean, I mention in virtually every speech I give that we're not going to achieve development goals unless we cut women into the equation. It seems very obvious to me. It seems very obvious to me the breakthrough strategy would be investing in women and girls. But are you asking me, is that university recognised? No. Because if it was, people would be acting on it, and they're not. So those of us in leadership roles in the UN have a duty to get out there and bat for this. And I must say the Secretary General makes very strong speeches on women and women's equality and participation and so on. And I think, that's fantastic. So, there's a lot of us out there, whether it's Mrs. Obeid at the UN Population Fund, or Anne Veneman, who's been with UNICEF for years, a lot of strong voices for women. And we are endeavouring to be heard. So thank you for providing an audience to at least listen to this, because I think it's pretty fundamental to making progress.
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I'm from New Zealand and I work in New York, and that's why I'm here. I wonder if you think that gender is a unique fracture point for developing policy around to bring people into both in the UN and other places. There is all kinds of obviously other fracture points like class, race, ethnicity, caste, all of those things. But is gender unique among those, in that if you write policy that brings women in where they weren't before, you achieve a lot of other goals that break down some of those other kind of identity barriers?
I think simply because of women are half the world, right? So it's a sheer scale. I just, when you have a group that of that size in the world population that doesn't enjoy equality of opportunity, anything you can do to support that group will have a very, very significant impact. Now, in saying that, I don't want to understate the significance of the other fracture points that you mentioned as well. Because in our mandate we advocate for the poor and marginalised and disempowered across the range of areas, whether the marginalisation stems from disability, faith, ethnicity, being in an indigenous group that doesn't enjoy full rights in a society, gay community. We are on the side of those who don't enjoy equal status, and try to support the advancement of their rights, on a global basis.
Is there any more questions? Yes.
Thank you for being here tonight. Enjoying your speech a lot. I have one simple question about the China, American, and the UN. What do you think the relationship among the China, America, and UN? Thank you. Political relationship and economic relationship. Thank you.
I've found, I must say, that China has been a good supporter of the UN system. That China respects the UN and is very constructively engaged in it. China wants the UN to work. I think China takes the approach that it needs peace to develop. Basic as that. And nothing's been more important than trying to raise the standard of living. But you don't do that if you're having to spend a lot of money on conflict, war, etc. So I would say from my perspective, China's role has been very constructive.
Are you surprised? Yes. Okay, I think time is up. I just wanted to ask you, Helen, you have in front of you young women who are thinking of maybe working for development, working for UNDP and so on. If you had to give them two advice about this issue of women, about, how to really make it in a man's world still, particularly in the political world, what would you say to them tonight? What is your message to them?
Well, I think you have to set a goal. If your goal is nothing, you're going to meet it every time, aren't you? So what you want to achieve, you have to have a goal. Your goals may change over time, of course, but you must have a goal. You must have something that you're striving for. You must have an ambition to achieve something for yourself or for others. And of course in development you can have the happy combination of both. You're actually contributing back into the society as well as finding fulfillment yourself in a very satisfying career. So it's a question of being goal focused. I guess goal one for a student is to successfully complete a degree. And I should say that to get into the international stream of the UN, you have to have a master's degree. That's basic. You can't be looked at below that level for these sorts of careers. But be goal focused, complete your studies, and be prepared to climb a ladder to where you want to go, because as I said in the course of my remarks, anything that's worthwhile requires hard work, dedication and determination. It doesn't come easily, actually. And don't expect it all to be a sort of easy path. I mean, to get to the sort of jobs I've done, you would take a lot of knocks. I sometimes say there's so many arrows in my back there's no room for any more. But you have to have a sense of perspective about that, a bit of a sense of humour, a bit of a sense of tolerance. And one thing you have to tolerate is fools gladly. You know the English phrase, he doesn't tolerate fools gladly. Well, you have to in public life. You meet a lot of fools actually. But you just got to keep that sense of purpose, sense of perspective. And if I went on from that, I'd say to everyone here that when you're in pursuit of these goals and where you want to go, don't go after it so hard that you leave no balance in your life. This applies to men and women, that you can become a completely burnt out shell if you don't make time for yourself and your family and your friends and your community. There's got to be some work-life balance. People got to eat properly. They've got to sleep. They've got to have their close relationships. You've got to look after all these things. So that's my lessons from life, I must say.
Well, with this recommendation, lesson, experience, I want to thank you very much for coming. I know that tomorrow is a very busy day for you with the UN and Haiti and so on, and we are really particularly grateful that on a rainy night like this, with the program that you have, you came to SIPA to share your perspectives on development. Thank you very much.